The iron gates stood 12 feet high, cold and unyielding against the palm of Uzi's hand. With a collective push, the metal groaned, a long scraping sound that echoed deep into the stone corridor beyond. Uzi, Danny, Laura, and Amy stepped into the library. The air inside felt thin, stagnant, and heavy with the scent of old paper. Lone sat at the center of the room, hunched over a mahogany desk. She did not look up, her focus locked on a parchment that seemed to pulse under the dim light. She traced a jagged line across the surface with a steady finger. "I have tracked the location of the royal blood tree," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. She tapped a specific point on the map, a remote sector buried deep within the uncharted jungle. "Without its fruit, my lineage remains incomplete." The group gathered around the desk, their shadows stretching long across the floorboards. Uzi looked at the map, then at the others. The weight of the objective settled in the room. Lone pushed the parchment toward them, her eyes finally lifting to meet theirs. The mission was no longer a theory, it was a destination. The library emptied in a flurry of movement. Rucksacks hit the floor, their zippers rasping as the team jammed in ropes, navigation tools, and rations. There was no room for hesitation. They moved with the efficiency of a machine, each person knowing their load. By dawn, they stood on the tarmac. The helicopter sat waiting, a jagged silhouette against the rising sun. The blades began to rotate, a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the soles of their boots. As the engine roared to life, the morning mist was shredded, swirling into the rotors until the world outside the cockpit blurred into a gray haze. They lifted off, the ground falling away until the landscape became a tapestry of deep, impenetrable green. The flight was short, marked only by the increasing density of the canopy below. When the skids finally touched the mud, the air changed instantly. The humidity hit them like a physical wall, thick and heavy with the scent of rotting vegetation. They stepped out, the silence of the jungle rushing in to replace the mechanical whine of the flight. Boots sank into the soft, wet ground with every step. The canopy above blocked the sky, casting the forest floor into a permanent, murky twilight. They stood for a moment, listening to the distant, rhythmic calls of unseen predators. The jungle path ended abruptly at the edge of a jagged ravine. A rope bridge stretched across the void, its wooden slats swaying in the damp wind. Uzi stepped onto the first plank, testing the tension. The ropes creaked, a sharp, metallic sound that vibrated through the anchor points. One by one, the team followed, their movements slow and deliberate. Halfway across, the air shifted. A sudden, violent gust of wind slammed into the ravine, catching the bridge like a sail. The main guide rope snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The structure lurched, tilting violently to the left. Wood splintered as the bridge twisted, throwing the team toward the edges. Uzi grabbed a support line, his knuckles white, while Danny scrambled to the far side. Laura and Amy were pinned to the near bank, the bridge now hanging at a near vertical angle. The chasm yawned beneath them, a dark, hungry mouth. "Meet at the tree!" Uzi shouted. Uzi and Danny lunged into the thickets on the north side, while Laura and Amy turned toward the mossy trail to the south. The group was severed. Uzi and Danny moved with practiced focus, reading the forest like a map. They tracked broken branches and flattened ferns, their boots leaving deep impressions in the soft, rotting loam. Every step was a battle against the thorny underbrush that clawed at their legs. Hours bled into one another until the trees finally thinned. A sudden, unnatural brightness bled through the canopy. They broke into a clearing and stopped dead. In the center stood the royal blood tree. Its bark shimmered with a metallic silver luster that seemed to pulse in the dim light. High above, a single crimson fruit hung from the topmost branch, glowing with a steady, hypnotic intensity. Laura and Amy emerged from the opposite side of the thicket, their faces smeared with mud, their breathing ragged. The group stood in a silent semicircle, the weight of the journey finally lifting as they stared at their prize. The silence was absolute, heavy with the scent of ozone and sap. Then, the canopy above them erupted in motion. A cloaked figure dropped from the shadows, snatched the fruit, and sprinted toward the far edge of the clearing. The moment of triumph shattered into instant, cold panic. The thief did not hesitate. The figure hit the ground running, boots tearing through the underbrush toward a clearing hidden behind a dense wall of palms. Uzi sprinted, his lungs burning, but the distance was too great. A low, mechanical hum vibrated through the ground, growing into a sharp, piercing whine. Beyond the palms, the outline of a small, sleek airplane emerged from the camouflage netting. The thief vaulted into the cockpit as the propellers began to churn, slicing through the humid air with a deafening roar. The plane lurched forward, its wheels kicking up clouds of red dust. The group did not stop to regroup. They scrambled toward the nearby helicopter, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Uzi grabbed the door handle, hauling himself inside while Danny and the others piled in behind him. The pilot slammed the ignition, and the rotors overhead groaned, fighting the inertia of the heavy machine. The air pressure shifted as the blades gained speed, creating a localized gale. With a violent shudder, the helicopter lifted off the ground. The airplane was already banking toward the horizon, a dark silhouette against the setting sun. The helicopter surged forward, its rotors screaming as it cut through the turbulent wake of the fleeing aircraft. The gap between them narrowed to a handful of feet. Below, the jungle canopy blurred into a jagged, dark sea. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and the violent thrash of wind. Uzi looked at Danny, his eyes locked on the target. The plane banked, its wing dipping dangerously close. There was no time for a plan, only the raw instinct to close the distance. Uzi kicked the helicopter door wide, the force of the slipstream nearly pulling him out. He braced his boots against the frame, felt the metal groan under his weight, and launched himself into the open sky. Danny followed a heartbeat later, a blur of motion. The wind roared in their ears, a deafening, hollow sound that drowned out all thought. Uzi slammed into the cold, vibrating metal. Danny crashed down beside him, both of them sliding across the slick surface as the plane tilted further into a sharp banking turn. Uzi kicked the cabin door inward, the metal frame buckling under the force. He tumbled into the cramped space, Danny right behind him. The interior was a blur of shadows and sharp, metallic edges. Two soldiers lunged forward, their movements precise and aggressive. Uzi caught a heavy blow to his shoulder, the impact driving him back against the bulkhead. He responded with a strike to the soldier's midsection, the force of the hit muffled by the roar of the engines. Danny grappled with the second guard, both of them slamming into the control console. The plane lurched violently, dropping hundreds of feet in a sudden air pocket. Everyone inside was thrown against the ceiling, limbs flailing as they fought for purchase. Gravity shifted, pinning them to the floor 1 second and tossing them into the air the next. Blades flashed in the dim light, scraping against the fuselage with a screeching, high-pitched whine. Uzi grabbed a soldier by the arm, twisting until the man lost his grip on a knife. They were locked in a desperate, suffocating struggle, the cabin vibrating so hard that every movement felt like a gamble. The soldiers were relentless. The soldier shoved Uzi aside, his hand darting toward the glowing red button on the main console. Uzi lunged, fingers scraping against the soldier's arm, but the man slammed his fist down with full force. A muffled, concussive thud echoed through the cabin, followed instantly by a jagged, tearing sound. The plane shuddered violently as the tail section disintegrated in a bloom of orange flame. The nose pitched downward, gravity instantly shifting to a vertical drop. Uzi and Danny were thrown toward the open cargo bay. They dove into the void, the air rushing past them like a solid wall. Behind them, the aircraft spiraled into a tight, uncontrollable spin. The ground rushed up to meet the metal frame. A deafening boom erupted as the fuselage slammed into the open field. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the crackle of burning fuel and the settling of twisted, smoking iron. The helicopter touched down in the tall grass, rotors kicking up a storm of dust and ash. Uzi, Danny, Laura, and Amy jumped out before the blades had even fully stopped, sprinting toward the smoldering crater. The wreckage was a twisted skeleton of metal, groaning as it cooled in the humid air. Near the edge of the impact zone, the cloaked figure lay motionless, half buried in the churned earth. A small, glowing, crimson fruit had rolled free, coming to rest against a jagged piece of fuselage. Lone stepped through the group, her boots crunching on the scorched ground. She did not hesitate. She reached down, retrieved the fruit, and brought it to her lips. She consumed it in a single fluid motion. For a heartbeat, there was total silence. Then, a blinding red pulse erupted from her skin, washing over the clearing like a physical wave. The light intensified, swirling around her in a violent, tightening vortex that forced the others to shield their eyes. The air hummed with a low, vibrating frequency that rattled their teeth. As the light began to fade, the ground beneath her feet cracked. She stood, perfectly still, her posture shifting, her presence expanding until it seemed to command the very atmosphere. She was Queen Lone.